Welcome to Building Bridges, and in this episode we have a surprise guest, and we are broadcasting from Istanbul as A9 TV station in cooperation with WTPN and an American network. And the aim of Building Bridges is to talk about issues that are important to everyone around the globe, and we will be focusing on promoting peace, unity and brotherhood between nations, cultures and unity between all religions. So I will let my friend introduce our guest to you.
We have a very distinguished guest today, Governor Johnson. Governor Johnson, welcome. It's an honor and pleasure to have you.
It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to introduce you first. Governor Gary Early Johnson, born January 1st, 1953, is an American businessman, a former governor of New Mexico, and the Libertarian Party nominee for President of the United States in the 2012 elections. Governor Johnson served as the 29th governor of the New Mexico from 1995 to 2003 as a member of the Republican Party and is known for his low-tax libertarian views and his strong emphasis on personal health and fitness. Governor Johnson, again, it's a pleasure and honor to have you.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Governor Johnson, welcome to our show again. And we have Roger Landry on the line. He's from United States. He's the founder of the Be the People Network, and he's the co-host of the Building Bridges programs. Welcome, Roger Landry. How are you?
I'm doing great, and I'm really looking forward to this show.
Yes, me too. And we have Jerry Davis. He is also the co-host of the Building Bridges Gateway program, and he is also the assistant executive director of Building Bridges programs. Hello, Jerry. How are you?
I'm doing great. Nice to see you all.
Yes, me too. Yes,
All right, Roger, you have the first question, I think.
Yes, I do. And before we get into politics, Governor Johnson, we all have character-building experiences in our lives. And from what I've seen of your biography, you have quite a few. But the one that really stands out in my mind, and the one I'd really like you to discuss with us a little bit, can you please give us a synopsis of your Mount Everest expedition? I realize you had a few mishaps there. I realize that you did succeed in summiting the mountain. Could you please give us a quick rundown on that expedition? I'm sure everybody is interested in this.
Well, it was a lifelong dream to be able to go to Mount Everest and attempt to climb Mount Everest. About 6 weeks before I left for Mount Everest, I broke my leg. I had a full fracture of
Sorry for that. Sorry.
Yes, but I had a full fracture of the tibia about 6 weeks before I left. So basically, I left for Nepal with a healing broken leg that I figured would heal by summit day, and it did. And we had a terrific expedition. It was everything that I hoped it would be. It was very spiritual. We did make it to the top. It was horrible weather conditions, so we went up and down the mountain 6 times. We went up the mountain, we came back down. We went up the mountain a little bit higher, we came back down, all to acclimatize and get used to the climb. And like I say, we were successful, and it was just a wonderful, dream come true.
You suffered frostbite, I understand, also during this expedition. That must have been grueling to do climbing with that as a condition.
Well, actually, the frostbite was due to my broken leg. I'm convinced that because of the lack of circulation in my broken leg, that's what caused the frostbite. The frostbite was a complete surprise. I knew that my foot was cold, summited, got back down to high camp, and first thing I did was I checked my toes. And my toes were sheet white. 20 minutes later, they were black, and I just refused to even believe that it was frostbite. And anyway, completely unexpected. This was not a trade-off of, gee, getting frostbite, I'm getting to the top. It was really a surprise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hate talking about it, and I'm kidding. I love talking about it.
Governor Johnson, I'm curious about your personal life. What kind of a life do you have outside your political life? I know that you are very, very busy nowadays because of your tight schedule, and looks like you will have until the elections.
What can you tell us that very few people know of?
Well, I am an athlete. I have built my dream home near Taos Ski Valley, which is as good a skiing as anywhere on the planet, and I live there because I love to ski. So I am an entrepreneur. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started a one-man construction business in Albuquerque in 1974 and actually grew that business to employ over 1,000 people.
Great.
I started that business in 1999. Nobody lost their job. They're doing better than ever. It allows me to have a full-time, unpaid job doing this. But when I'm not doing this, I'm skiing. At 59 years old, I still am a competitive mountain biker, road cyclist.
MashaAllah.
Great success, yes, mashallah.
Well, the next question is mine, actually. I would like to ask you, Governor Johnson, about Islam. As you know, there are misconceptions in America against Muslims, and there is prejudice, and people are misinformed about Islam. What do you think could be done if you were elected as a president or if you weren't as a governor to change these misconceptions? And because this is breeding so much hatred between people of different religions.
First of all, I agree with you, and it's a horrible misconception. And I think that as President of the United States, I would be able to address that misconception. I think from a policy standpoint, the National Defense Authorization Act that was signed in this country allows for citizens of the United States to be arrested and detained without being charged. I think the Muslim community has been unfairly targeted as a result of this legislation that has passed. I would have never signed that legislation in the first place, allowing for this to happen.
Well, this is good. This is great to hear, actually, yes.
Yes. And Governor Johnson, as you already know, there is a great turmoil in the Middle East. And during our programs, we're always focusing on the great danger in the area, which is Marxism. And it includes the Arab countries as well as Iran there. And we also think that, we also stress that America should unite their forces with Turkey and educate those people in the Middle East. What is your politics about Middle East? And I would like to ask whether you are satisfied with the results of the interventionist politics of the United States for the last decades.
No, I am 180 degrees opposed to our military interventions. I think our military interventions need to stop. That doesn't mean that diplomacy stops. That doesn't mean that we don't have...
Yes.
But in my opinion, we have hundreds of millions of enemies to this country because of our military interventions, that but those military interventions we wouldn't otherwise have. Right now, I would pull our personnel from our embassies. We can't be protected in these embassies where we've been invited to stay, then let's get out and not become some focal point here for the unrest that does exist in the Middle East. I just think that our military interventions, Libya, we spent hundreds of millions of dollars ousting Gaddafi. To what end? What are vital American interests? I need to be told that. I think that we have horrible missteps when it comes to foreign policy, and it starts with that we lead with our military. We've become the bully on the block.
Okay, Governor Johnson, I think America's existence in the region is undeniable for the last few decades, and I believe that you should be there. I mean, you should exist there, but not in the sense of an intervention, of course. For example, if an intervention should be made, it should be made in the sense of an ideological struggle against ideologies we both oppose. For example, we both oppose communism, we both oppose Marxism in the region, we both oppose dictatorship, but it should be in the sense of ideological struggle. Because I think you cannot fight an ideology with arms and guns and bombs and things like that. I also want to ask you another question because we're, in the media. So, would you enact some sort of truth in media liability on a federal level to hold media responsible for truthful resources and truthful content?
As the Libertarian nominee for president, I that people to tell the truth, but I think you end up having government arbitrate who tells the truth and who doesn't, and that in and of itself can be very, very corrupt. So I would not, I agree with your premise. I think that by passing that kind of legislation that you're going to end up convicting innocents that are in fact telling the truth.
By the way, can you explain to our audience, international audience, what is the difference between a Democrat, a Republican, and a Libertarian, and why you choose the latter one?
Well, I think a libertarian is the best of both worlds. I think that a libertarian, speaking with a broad brushstroke, is socially accepting and fiscally conservative. I think Democrats historically are supposed to be good at civil liberties. No police state. I think they're not so good on civil liberties. They're horrible when it comes to dollars and cents. Republicans are supposed to be good on dollars and cents. They're really horrible when it comes to social issues, allowing you and I to decide things that only you and I should decide in our lives. So I think a libertarian is the best of both. A libertarian is really good when it comes to civil liberties, letting you and I decide what we should or shouldn't do in our lives. And I think a libertarian is really good when it comes to dollars and cents. I think we need to balance the federal budget in this country right now, or we are going to find ourselves in a monetary collapse. And that will be the collapse of the U.S. dollar due to the inflation that's going along with borrowing and printing money right now to the tune of 43% that we spend.
Governor Johnson, do you think the U.S. dollar will keep its place as the reserve currency for the next year or the years to come?
Well, for the United States to assure that that happens, we need to balance the federal budget now. We need policies that promote a strong U.S. dollar, not a weak U.S. dollar. And right now, all of our policies are weak U.S. dollar. So there would be a question, I think, there would be a question among many Americans, and I am ascertaining that it's also a concern of yours. Will we remain the world currency? Well, we have an opportunity to remain the world currency, but things have taken place in this country that are not taking place in this country.
So what would you feel about the announcement of QE3 then?
I would be opposed to QE3. This is the, basically QE3 is the Federal Reserve of the United States buying up assets. What kind of assets? Well, let me say that whatever they buy, whether it's mortgage-backed securities, whether it's treasury notes, whether it's stocks, whatever they buy, those assets are going to rise in price artificially. And as a result of that, I think we're hastening the day of doom, if you will.
Along with the economics part of it, of course, we know what the wars, right now the wars are costing the U.S. about $1.3 trillion a year. And a lot of that money, I think, in my opinion, could be put to better use as far as the political end of it, as far as working out differences, as Jaylon said a while ago. But the question I would have for you would be in the Middle East. I know they're working on a Turkish Islamic Union, and this would open a lot of economic and as well as social doors in the countries in that area. And what I'd want to ask you, would you allow and work with them, as president, would you allow for them their own system of democracy to be enacted within this union without a lot of stipulations from the U.S. imposed democracy that we have now?
Yeah, that's the difference. The difference is we impose our will on other countries, unintended consequence, And that at the root of that unintended consequence is really distrust or putting the United States in a position of being looked upon as opposed to being a partner, if you will.
Yes, exactly. I think being a partner in that would go a lot longer. And even as you said a while ago, and I call it the charade that went on in Libya. I think there could have been a lot different kind of democratic solutions to that, rather than go in and just bomb everything to pieces. But I really believe that because I've done a little study on the Turkish Islamic Union, and I know that in the area it would open up a lot of economic trade and a lot of social trade, and I think that the U.S. is part of that. As far as an economic partner, would be an awesome thing for everybody all the way around.
Yes, I concur completely.
Not to give you advice, just to mention.
But we know that you are very liberal and you respect others' opinions. That's why we feel very comfortable to talk to you.
The best educational interviews, I take this as such. Thank you.
We thank you.
Governor Johnson, with all of what responsibilities do you feel the U.S. as the only remaining superpower in the world, how do you feel we have a sway on global politics, and what do you feel our responsibilities are with that position going forward? Because at this point, as you so aptly pointed out, we are basically the bully on the block, and we are self-perpetuating our own enemies. So what do you feel is the place of the United States as the only remaining superpower?
A genuine living by example of the old act being the beacon, the liberty beacon on the hill, not interfering in other nations' affairs, but with other nations and certainly input from the standpoint of advice. And not dictating to other countries what they should or shouldn't do.
Yes.
We are bearing right now the unintended consequence of all that, and this is not good. This is not good, and the solution is let us extricate ourselves militarily from all the engagements that we currently have. I am proposing a 53% reduction in military spending as. This is the only way we remain that superpower, is to get our own house in order. I don't know how it is that we're pretending to offer advice to anyone else when we have such issues at home that have us at a point of financial collapse.
Governor Johnson, I think I have to be fair about American people because, for example, what America tried to do in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in Laos was a noble cause because we all know that communism is not a right way of living for any person. So when it's about communism or Marxism or a collectivist system, of course, someone should interfere there. But I think none of us could get any success there, including America, because you cannot, just like I said a few minutes ago, you cannot fight an ideology with bombs and guns and things like that. Because they are fighting with guerrilla warfare, and if you create a new conflict there, the ideology will only grow. And when we look at Marxism in the world, it did grow. For example, we look at South America, we look at all North African Arab countries, we look at all countries in the Far East. Marxism is everywhere. It's the leading ideology in the world right now. And what we all failed to do was fighting it ideologically. So I think, of course, we should I understand America for interfering with the politics of other nations. And I think someone with insight should do when they see this, and it's a noble cause. But I think an invasion or an occupation is not going to end anything if the problem is ideological.
I completely concur. Bravo.
And Governor Johnson, what are your views about the conflicts in America right now? How will your presidency change or modify this?
Well, by conflicts that exist in America, I think that let me just quickly point out the differences between myself and the other two candidates running for president. And by the way, I'm going to be the only candidate on the ballot in all 50 states when it comes to a third party. Right now,
Governor Johnson, if I could interrupt for just 1 second, and I apologize. If you were to point out the differences between you and the other two prime candidates, that would take 3 to 4 hours. You're here on this show because you have the right ideas and the right ideals for the people. So, yes, we do agree. Your ideas are very different, and we appreciate them.
Right, and it only takes about 1 minute. 7 minutes. I don't want to bomb Iran. I want to get out of Afghanistan and bring the troops home tomorrow. I support marriage equality. I think that it's a constitutionally guaranteed right. I would have never signed the National Defense Authorization Act. I would like to repeal the Patriot Act. I balance the federal budget now. I want to abolish income tax, corporate tax. I want to eliminate the IRS in this country and replace all of that with one federal consumption tax. In this case, I'm embracing the fair tax. These are the differences that I have with my two opponents.
Perfect.
Huge differences.
Thank you.
Very, very huge.
Well, we can see that you're on the side of peace, actually. Bring peace to the entire world. We like this view, and we definitely agree, because military precautions only generated troubles in the 20th century. As we know, so entire humanity had a very bad experience. 100 million people were killed in the World War I, World War II, and many ideologies. That was the bloodiest century of the entire human history. And I think a new era is coming. It is nice to have your views in this direction. My next question is actually, can you please explain how you become one of the most successful governors in the political history?
Well, I think that that's really debatable. Just ask any governor who has ever served, and they're going to say they're the most successful governor that has ever served. But
Yes.
I do really think that I made a difference. I may have vetoed more legislation than the other 49 governors in the country combined when I was governor of New Mexico. I really stood up to spending. I really stood up to government passing laws that I really didn't think were going to make any difference in any of our lives, weren't going to make us any safer, weren't going to make us any more healthy. They were just going to add time and money to all of our lives. Why do that? Why pass laws that are going to add time and money and not going to change our lives? So I think I had a very successful 2 terms. I did serve 2 terms as a Republican governor in a state that's 2-to-1 Democrat, making a name for myself pinching pennies. So I think that speaks volumes. I think people really do appreciate good stewardship of tax dollars.
You also brought your state out of the red. When you took over, they had a deficit. When you got out, they had a surplus. And you did all of this while lowering taxes, I believe 14 times over 8 years? So you're one of the most successful governors in recent history.
I would like to ask you what event or which events brought you to decide to run for presidency? I personally believe in destiny, but did you have plans, or did you decide before being a politician and then being a candidate?
I ran for governor of New Mexico completely outside of the political system. I had never been involved in politics prior to getting elected governor of New Mexico, and I would not be doing this right now if I didn't think I could do this job. I wouldn't be doing this right now if I didn't think I could do a really good job at this right now. And I see very fundamental issues in this country. We have a growing police state in this country. We find ourselves in a continuous state of war. Let's stop with our military interventions and then we find ourselves with unsustainable spending and debt. It has to stop, and it has to stop now.
Yes.
We totally agree.
Ron Paul spoke a lot about ending the Federal Reserve and that system of money, and it would take a while to explain IMF and the WBD and International Bankers Union and so forth. But would you be in favor also of ending the Federal Reserve and limiting the amount of interaction with IMF and World Bank and working towards a more true economy, the competition of currencies?
Yes, I would sign legislation allowing for repeal of legal tender laws, and I would sign legislation allowing for competing currencies to be based on commodities. Look, the Federal Reserve, the Treasury of the United States prints money. They give money to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve loans that to the banks for 0%. The banks don't loan it to U.S. citizens. They buy up treasuries in a closed loop. It's an inside game. It's not fair. U.S. citizens pay for the profits that the banks make without any benefit whatsoever. It's an inside game. At a minimum, there should be an audit of the Federal Reserve, turning the lights on with regard to what the Federal Reserve does. How much impact do we have with the IMF? This is a closed group that dictates what happens in this country with really no oversight at all by anyone. Just get rid of it and allow the free market to function.
I never understand.
I want to give a little bit of information on the World Bank at the moment that you may not know. Many people don't. When it comes to production, as far as fresh fruits, vegetables, milk, and so forth, if you look up the stipulations on that as to what the Federal Department of Agriculture goes by, the actual author of those documents is the World Bank. I don't know if you know that or not. Many people don't, but they are actually the authors of the stipulations to the procedures that must be gone through to ensure how that stuff is handled is the World Bank. That's how deep they are into our economy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And of course, because the industry all turned into a war industry, the industries remained in the United States right now are really restricted. And I can see that problem too. So I want to ask another question. If you're elected, Governor Johnson, will you use your executive administrative powers to help restructure the Supreme Court and put the power of the judicial system back in the hands of the states?
I think that the courts are established from a constitutional standpoint. So no, this is something constitutional, and you could certainly argue the makeup of the court, but the appointments to the court are constitutional, and no.
Actually, the president has the right to appoint Supreme Court judges through executive order, through executive, what they call executive, their privilege.
When a Supreme Court justice resigns, at that the sitting president appoints a new Supreme Court justice. Appointments to the Supreme Court based on the justice's interpretation of the Constitution on original intent.
Very good answer.
And to bring that full circle, because you opened up this can, and I really, really think we need to go there, especially for our American audience. That's the Constitution. Both you and Dr. Paul has very, very strong libertarian views. We do know that he is basically a libertarian at heart. The Constitution in the United States is a framework that sets up how this government is supposed to be run. It is originally intended to be a government of, for, and by we the people. We are not servants to the government are servants to the people. You are a very big backer of the Constitution, as is Dr. Paul. We see the Constitution being thwarted constantly in this country. We see our rights and freedoms being taken away on a daily basis by either legislation or executive order. Could you give us a little bit of how you feel about the Constitution and what you think is happening to the Constitution, how it's being shredded in this country?
Well, let's start with the notion that most Americans believe that we are a democracy. We are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. We are a country governed by laws, and at the basis of those laws is the United States Constitution. So what people don't understand in this country is that in a democracy you can vote yourself a raise. And if everybody votes themselves a raise, well, you end up with a situation where the country can no longer sustain itself, and that's actually where we've gotten. So what we've done is we've actually thwarted the Constitution. We're voting ourselves a raise when there is no basis, and that's where I would argue comes the erosion of the Constitution, that we've eroded that notion of you can't vote yourself a raise. We've voted ourselves one. It's not sustainable. We have a constitutional republic. We're governed by laws, and the laws say we can't do that, and yet we do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it was Benjamin Franklin that was asked when he came out. He said, "What have you sirs given us?" And he says, "I've given you a republic if you can keep it."
Very well.
Governor
Governor
Johnson.
You go ahead.
I,
Remember anything?
Governor Johnson, I would like to have your opinion about Turkey. Do you think Turkey is a good ally of America, and do you have plans to strengthen the relationships between these two countries?
I think all relationships, but not not pointing a gun.
Yes.
Yes, sure.
That would be the philosophy. Yes, strengthen relationships, be the beacon on the hill, but not involve ourselves in making decisions that only you should be making, that only Turkey should be making.
Governor Johnson, I have a question I personally am curious about. We all know that the suicide rate in America is rising day by day, and a high number is between the soldiers and the veterans. And we all know the reason of suicide is almost always, lovelessness and loneliness. And how do you think this can be overcome?
Well, when it comes to servicemen and women, I'm outraged over the fact that politicians are to blame for us because we involve ourselves militarily. The blame for that are politicians that beat their chests, and in the name of electing me or re-electing me, I'm going to save you from the terrorist threat, so we're going to involve our military worldwide. We're going to save you. Well, that comes at a cost, and the cost is hundreds of thousands of innocents that end up dying in these conflicts. The ramifications of this are our men and women coming back in body bags or coming back with their limbs blown off, and I want all of this to stop. I think when this stops, I have to believe that suicide rates, I have to believe that self-esteem rises.
Are you aware, I'm sure you are, but I don't know if most of our audience is, that there are a little bit over 6,000 casualties so far with our military interventions in the Middle East. The suicide count is up around 12,000. So we have had 12,000 or twice as many servicemen can commit suicide as a result of their service as we have had servicemen lose their lives as a result of combat. This screams there is something very wrong here. Do you agree, Governor?
I had never heard that statistic until right now. That is staggering.
That is the truth.
That's a statistic.
I will be incorporating this in what I have to say about the issue.
Thank you very much, sir.
Very much.
Well, we talk about the misconceptions against Islam in U.S., and you explained it very nicely. Do you think Turkey could be a model to eradicate the radicalism and bigotry, which is very common in the Middle East, in the Islamic countries? That probably could be also part of the problem, but there is so many misconceptions and prejudice.
There are a tremendous amount of misconception, and I, as President of the United States, today I would love to collaborate with Turkey to change that perception.
You know the riots against anti-Islamic movie all around the Islamic world. We look at Egypt, for example. Egypt is 75% Muslim, and we look at Libya, it's 97% Muslim, and we look at Turkey, which is 98% Muslim, higher than the two. But when we look at the protests in Turkey or the reaction in Turkey, it wasn't like the riots there. No, it was very democratic. People only tried to introduce the reality of Islam, and they tried to introduce people and educate people about the real life of our Prophet. I think that alone explains the approach of Turkish Muslims to any incident in the region. I think that alone explains Turkish Muslims and the secular structure of Turkish government and how it works perfectly with Islam will serve as a role model in Turkey, in the region.
Okay.
All right. What about the next question?
Okay, Jerry, do you have one?
Well, I think one big problem that we have with our policy is the amount of power we give to the UN to influence what America does. And of course, I realize that the UN is made up of several countries, and I realize the importance of the UN. But there are also things I know of about the agreements we have with the UN that do weigh heavily on our reaction. And so far, from what I can see, and many of the people that I know can see, it hasn't worked real well in a lot of areas. So one thing I would like to ask is, as president, would you consider moving away from the more of the thought of the one world government and the strong-handed politics that are used now to enforce that around the world as to coming to that one world government, rather than to promote it and to promote the sovereignty of each nation? And I do want to throw a little bit of religion in here, because in Islam it says there's no compulsion in Islam. And in my feeling, I don't think there should be any compulsion in politics in that way. So I would just like to get your thoughts on that.
First of all, I agree with everything that you had to say. I think that we should be promoting a nation sovereignty and not a one world government. I like the notion of the United Nations from the standpoint of diplomacy, of working with others. I am promising to submit a budget to Congress in the year 2013 to balance the federal budget. I think in this country we all have to engage in a process of mutual sacrifice to achieve this. So I would be looking at a 43% reduction in United Nations spending. That said, I would hope that would bring United Nations. As a United States citizen, I resent being told by the United Nations how I should or should not live my life, whether or not I can or cannot own a firearm. I can just imagine, given my resentment being told that as a U.S. citizen, how the rest of the world must resent the United States for far, far, far more egregious, here's what you have to do, and if you don't, here are the implications, and that we follow through with those implications.
Governor Johnson, thank you for your sincere approach on our program, and thank you for being a part of our program today. It was a great discussion.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Governor
and if you
Johnson,
ever have the opportunity to visit Turkey, we would like to have you in our studio.
It's a deal. I'll hold you to
All
it.
right.
it's,
Thank you, Governor Johnson.
you have
It was a
great
pleasure
thoughts.
meeting
Governor Johnson, you have great thoughts. We are wishing you a great success, and we pray for you. Thank you,
Thank you
for
very
joining our show.
Thank you. We
It
wish
was
you
an honor.
success.
It was an honor.
Thank you.
Yes.
And we have come to another end of another Building Bridges episode. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.